Okay, so we're just finishing up this. If you want to put like a part B next to it or whatever, you can. It doesn't really matter. For the video anyway, this is part B because we just didn't quite finish it yesterday. So we ended up talking about angles, is that correct? Or an angle. And rays. Very good. Let's do this. Let's draw an angle. Is that technically an angle?
Yeah.
It's close. What's missing though?
Oh,
the arrows. Okay, why do we need arrows on it?
because it will go infinitely.
Right, and you said it before, Anthony. What did you say? An angle is made up of what? You said it earlier. Two rays. Very good. Okay, so two rays. So a ray must have an arrow. Now remember what a ray does. A ray starts at a certain point right here. Did we talk about what that point was called? I think we did yesterday.
Vertex.
Very good. It's not a coordinate. It's a vertex. Okay, so this, write it, if you didn't write it down yesterday, write it down now. So this point right here, and what did we do? We named this, what, ABC or BA? What was this, B?
BA. That was B.
And then A, and then we had a C right there, okay? All right, so point B is the vertex. So I could have a question. There could be a question in the book. I don't know. I don't memorize all the questions. But it could say, what is the vertex of this angle, all right, of angle ABC? What would you say? You would say, not just B, what is it? It's a what? It's a point, okay? So don't just say B, say point B, all right? We don't really have a symbol for a point, so we just write the word point, okay? What's that? A dot on a line is representing a point, but when we write it out, we write the word point, okay? So we'll write point B, yeah.
Did you say the vertex was also the endpoint?
It's the endpoint of both rays, yes, all right? So do you remember a ray has an endpoint? Did we talk about that? All right, let's just do that real quick here. So there's the arrow. We'll put a little dot right there. So this is a ray, all right? So this point right here is the endpoint. So really, an angle is just two rays with a common endpoint. Everybody see that? It doesn't keep going because a ray only keeps going in one direction. It actually has a beginning. Remember, what keeps going in both directions? A line, okay? But a ray does have a starting point, but it keeps on going forever in one direction, okay? So that's the difference between a ray and a line. So this is called an endpoint. Endpoint. All right, and both of these rays share the same endpoint, and we call that point that they both share the vertex of the angle. We good? All right, let's see. Did we talk about, we talked about naming them, didn't we? So let's go through that quickly. So my handwriting is terrible on this thing. Okay, so if I said name this angle, if I ask you to name the angle, there's more than one way just to name the angle. All right, now you wouldn't have to put like all the different ways to name it. You could just pick one of them. But Ben, give me one way to name this angle right here. Okay, and we put an angle in front of it though. We don't just say ABC, we say angle ABC, all right? So if I ask you for a line, what do you say? Line, whatever. If I ask you for a point, what do you say? Point, whatever. If I ask for a ray, what do you say? Talk to me. Ray, if I ask for a ray, you say what? Ray, whatever. Okay, the name is. So if I ask you for this angle, you would say angle what? ABC. Now, what's really important about this? Could I just say angle BAC? Does it matter what order I put this stuff in? It kind of does. Okay, there's one thing that matters. There's the other two that don't really matter. Okay, Gideon, do you have a question? Okay, just yawning. All right. So angle ABC. What's really important about how we name this angle right here? Let's give somebody else a chance. Gavin, you raising your hand or just yawning? Okay, all right, go ahead. What's the important thing about naming this angle right here? Yeah, it's the B. What about the B? The B's got to be where? In the middle, okay? The vertex, now it's not always going to be B, understand that. It could be different letters, all right, different names. But the vertex always has to be in the middle. It doesn't matter if you go ABC or what's another way you could do it with 3 points? CBA, right, CBA. Now you could, as long as there's only one angle coming out of that vertex, you could name this just with the point that's the vertex. So I could name this angle what? B. If there's only one angle coming out of it. I'll show you an example in a second where you could have more than one angle coming out of it, okay? So those are three different ways you can name this. You cannot name this ACB, right? Because C is not the vertex, agreed? You cannot name it, what else? What's another one you could not name it? C what? AB. You couldn't name it B what? AC. Or you couldn't name it BCA. So there's a lot of combinations you cannot name it. It wouldn't make any sense. B always has to be in the middle, or you could just let it be by itself. We got it? We're going to be doing this stuff. We're going to be naming angles the rest of the year. Okay? This is really, out of everything we've taught so far, this is probably the most foundational thing that you're going to learn that we're going to be using the rest of the year. It's not hard. That's a good thing, right? But again, remember what geometry is. It's a language. We've got to speak the language, okay? So we got to speak the same language, and that's part of it right there, naming the angles. All right? Here's something that we didn't talk about yesterday, I don't think. This ray, what is that ray called right there? Go ahead, Anthony. Now remember how we do a ray. How do we name a ray, Gideon? Ray BA, very good. Okay, you always start at the end point of the ray, and whatever point is on here, right? That's the. And I'm gonna remind me to tell you something else about a ray. I don't think we hit this yesterday. Okay, so somebody remind me, because you can have more than one point, right? Beyond the vertex or beyond the end point. So remind me to do that. But this ray right here is called the side of the angle. All right, so this is also, because there's two rays, so there's how many sides to an angle? There's two sides. So this is also a side of an angle. And if I asked you to name one of the sides of the angle, what would you name this side right here? And there's only one way to name this one. Now, I couldn't say side A. Remember, it's a vertex, okay? So, I'm sorry. I saw that word. It's a ray. So how do we name a ray? Not just with one letter. We got to start with the end point and then whatever other point it goes through. So this would be ray what? BA. We have a little symbol for ray BA. We don't write the word ray in front of it, do we? Yeah, it's just an arrow over top just like that. Make sense? So that's the name of this side of the ray. So they could ask you, name the two sides of the angle. So what would you do? You would write ray BA and also, what's the other one? Give me the word. Ray BC, all right? So don't just say BC, say ray BC. Because I don't know if you're talking about line BC, line segment BC, which we haven't talked about just yet, but we will. So you could also say BC. Could I say ray AB? No, why not? That's right, you got to start with where the end point is, okay? A is not the end point. It's just some point on the ray, all right? This thing right here, this ray does not keep going through B, does it? All right, it stops at B. That's the end point. So I cannot call this ray AB. Everybody getting this? This is a common mistake students make all the time. You know, they think lines, it doesn't matter what order. I could call it line AB and line BA. It doesn't make any difference. But a ray is more specific than that. A ray has an end point. It has to start with the end point. You got it? And that's why we called it ray BA and ray BC. We clear or not? All right, if you have any questions, just ask me. All right, what is I going to say? Oh, here's another thing we do. Sometimes you're going to see multiple angles coming from the same vertex, right? And you have to talk about what angle. So sometimes we'll do this. We'll put it like a little curvy thing right here to represent that angle. I'll show you here in a second. Because I said remind me, right? So I actually remembered. So let's try this. Let's change colors first of all. Let's go back to the white. Let's make a line. So watch this. This isn't in the book, but I think this is important. Gotta do this, gotta do this. Line. Let's do another one. Let's have one coming like this. And then let's have one coming like that. There we go. Now, and let's put some letters in here. Let's just do the A thing again. It's just a lot easier, I guess. That's supposed to be right on the line or on the ray. Okay, so now check this out. Now we don't just have one letter or one angle coming out of this vertex B. How many angles do we have here altogether, Zion? We have 3. Very good. Most people would say 2. I was expecting that, but that's good. You saw 3. So let's mark the 3. What's that?
I can't see how anybody would say 2.
Oh, you wouldn't? Okay. I would say this one right here and this one right here. A lot of people just see that, but then they don't see what? The whole big angle. Okay? So you guys are much smarter than the students I used to teach, I guess. So this is how we would label it. Everybody watch. There's a lot of times where we label it. If I wanted to talk about this angle right here, everybody listen. If I want to talk about this angle right here, what would this angle be? What would I call this? We'll call it the pink angle. I would call it what? ABC. Yeah. Or I could call it what? CBA. Angle CBA. Okay? Could I call it just angle B?
No, because there's other angle B.
That's right, because I don't know which angle you're talking about. If I just said angle B,
You could think angle DBA.
guys,
CBB.
keep your feet on the floor. Okay. Move up a little bit so you're not touching his desk. There you go. All right, say it. Who was?
You could say angle B. You could think of angle ABC.
That's right, because look at this angle right here. Now, if I was going to differentiate this angle and this angle right here, this has one little curvy mark. I don't know what you call them. Just one little arc. Okay. In order to differentiate them, I would put 2 arcs. Do you see that?
Yeah.
All right. So what about the one with 2 arcs? What would I name that? So we'll do this. We'll say, I don't know. We'll just do it right here. Okay. Angle CBD. CBD. Or I could name this one with 2 arcs. What else? DBC. I could just go the other direction. But what's really important about this? That B is in the middle, okay? Because that's your vertex. You understand why I can't just say angle B? Because if I just said angle B, I don't know if you're talking about this angle right here. I don't know if you're talking about this one. And I don't know if you're talking about, what's the other one?
Angle AB.
This whole thing. So if I put 1 arc here, 2 arcs here, how many am I going to put here? 3. If I can get that to look kind of even. That's close enough. All right. So what about the 3 arcs? What would I call the ones with 3 arcs? ABD. Angle ABD, sorry. Okay, or I could call it angle DBA. So I cannot just say angle B. A lot of students do that. That's something that I see year after year when I teach geometry. Is they'll say, oh, that's angle B. Well, which one? There's 3 angles there with B as the vertex. How do I know which one you're talking about? So you can't just say angle B. Why can I just say angle B right here and I'm fine? That's right, there's only 1 angle there, okay? Does that make sense? So right here, there's more than 1 angle, so I can't just say angle B. I got to be a lot more specific about it. Let's do a couple more things real quick. Let's go back to the white line right here. Here's something I don't think that I talked about before. Let's go back to rays again. So there's an endpoint. I'll call this W, call this X, call this Y, call this Z. All right. So here's a ray. If I ask you to name the ray, there's actually more than one way you could name this ray. But you always have to start with what? On this particular one right here. The endpoint, which is, in this case, what? W. So if I was going to name this ray, I'd have to start with W. But now, what's the second point? Do I put W, X, Y, Z for my ray? Do I just use the ones on the end, the W and the Z? It doesn't matter which ones you use, as long as you use W as your first one, okay? If W is your first one, you could call this ray WX. What's another way you could call this? WY. And you could call it WZ. All right? Could I call this ray XY?
No.
Why not? Because that's not the endpoint. That's right. Okay, W is the endpoint. You with me on that? All right. So that's pretty important. That's one thing I failed to mention yesterday, and I think we need to make sure we do that. One more thing, and then we'll be finished. What am I missing? I mentioned this yesterday? I did? Oh, okay. All right, if I did, that's good. My memory's not that great. It is always good to go over something more than once. Okay, let's do this. Let's draw an angle. I got to click off of this to be able to draw the other line. There we go. All right, there's an angle right there. This is not, well, it kind of is. There will be one thing that we do later on that is going to be important. Right now, it's not that big of a deal, but it's okay. So here's an angle. We're going to talk about the interior of the angle and the exterior of the angle. So if I asked you to put a point, if I asked you to draw an angle and put a point in the interior of the angle, it's going to go, where do you think? In between, right, in between those two rays, all right? So anywhere in here, pretend that's shading, all right? I'm shading all that in, all right? So if you have a point right there, that would be considered the what? The interior of the angle. And that will come into play later on in the book, all right? So what do you think all the stuff outside of this is going to be? Very good. You guys are so smart. Okay, so that's the exterior of the angle. All right? Exterior. It would not be considered part of the ray. You can't, but anything on the outside of those two rays. Okay, that would be the exterior. They give you a more complicated definition in the book. If you read it, it hardly makes any sense, but this is basically what it's saying. Okay. Well, because there's little nuances that maybe just saying all the stuff on the outside doesn't really cover, all the stuff on the inside doesn't really cover. So they just have to be really, really specific, about it. But as far as you're concerned, I don't think you are going to worry too much about that. But this is the interior, this is the exterior. Again, we will do something later on where we talk about the interior of the angle, and we will talk about the exterior of the angle. But that's a lot later on, okay? But at least you know it, and now you're good. I think that covers it. So let's let me give you the homework. Correct. So this is kind of jumpy, so write it down. So here's your homework. It's section 1-4. Make sure you put section 1-4 on your paper. I had one or two people that turned the homework in, you didn't put the section number. And the last thing that I did when I asked you to turn it in, I said, everybody look at your paper. Do you have a first and a last name on there? Everybody's like, yes. I said, do you have the section number on there? Everybody's yes. But I still had people turn in, not a lot, but a couple people turn it in without the section number. Guess what happens if you don't put the section number? I take a point off, -1. I hate to do that because it really doesn't have anything to do with your homework, but homework is basically a participation grade, all right? And it's about following instructions. If you don't follow instructions, then I take points off, all right? So I won't take points off if you don't put the date, but if you do put the date that it was due, all right? So it's due tomorrow, so tomorrow is the 9th, okay? So put the 9th on there, all right? And here we go. Here's the numbers. Now, again, I skipped around a little bit, so write them down. So 1 to 12. Oh, good call. It's pages 21 and 22. It's 1 to 12, and then you're going to skip all the way to 30, and you're going to go to 42. Now, there's a couple in here. Remember, I skipped that section on sets and subsets and all that kind of thing. Well, there's a couple questions that ask about that, so I'm going to omit. What's omit mean?
Take out.
Right, just leave out. All right, so don't do these. Numbers 2 and 38. If you really feel like you want to do them, feel free. All right, but you don't have to do 2 and 38. Correct. That's what omit means. Omit means leave them out. All right, so you don't have to do 2 and you don't have to do 38, but do all the other ones. You got it? That'll be due tomorrow. We'll go over that tomorrow. And yes, you got about 15 minutes. About 16 minutes to work on it now. So you should be able to get a lot of that done. Make sure you label your paper first thing, and then you can start working on your problems.